Hello and welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Kevin Graham.
And I'm John Dykes.
Today we're joined by Steve Armstrong and David Alexander from Fansbet. Hello lads.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yep, good to be here. Appreciate it.
All the way up from Manchester, Steve.
Well, I am. He's not had a journey like the one I've had, but no, it's never a bad thing coming up here. Whether it be Glasgow, Edinburgh, I've never had. Never been short of stuff to do, and nights are easy to occupy yourself with. So the only downside I've got here is I'm getting pure grief off the missus, because I was away from home on football duties quite a lot last week. So my current status at home is pretty low. So I will need to take some gifts back.
I mean, you told us your schedule last week. What did that entail as a fan going to the games, etc.?
It started on a Saturday. We had Bournemouth away, which was a noon kick-off. So our coach from Manchester was, I think, we were up at 4:30 to get the coach for 6, because we've been running the same coach to away games for getting on for. We started our own bus in 1991, so we've been running the same coach, largely the same group of lads, obviously different buses. Various coach companies over the many years we've been doing it have sort of decided that they'd rather have other people on board, but as we've kind of got older and wiser, we've had the same company for a little while, so we're pretty well drilled on that. But yeah, we had Bournemouth away, then we went down to, obviously we had the Turin game, so we went to Cambridge because we were flying from Stansted, so we went to Cambridge on the Monday night. So we had a night out in Cambridge, which was good fun. Upsetting the students and all that sort of stuff. We then flew to Turin, so we had 3 days in Turin. Had Friday back at home, being a good boy, and then Saturday, Anthony Crolla fight on the Bellew undercard at Manchester Arena. Crolla's a good friend of ours, so we always make sure we get behind him and support him. And he said on a recent podcast of ours, he understands the support he gets. What he doesn't understand why we have to meet at 9 a.m. in the morning for a fight that starts at 9 p.m. at night. So we had that, and then obviously the small matter of United v City, which for me is still the biggest game in my calendar, and always will be, despite rivalries that we've got everywhere else. As a born and bred North Mancunian, where I grew up only knowing City fans, and City fans were the only other fans that were around me at school and in the streets around where we used to kick about. That's all I knew, so that's why the rivalry will always be a strong one for me. So yeah, although the result didn't go to plan, it wasn't a bad old week, but I'm paying for it now internally.
See, the thing with the Manchester derby is, I think I'm probably just a typical Scottish fan in that I kept a good eye on Manchester United when Fergie went down, and particularly when Brian McClair went down from Celtic. And obviously there was that period of domination when Manchester United were winning leagues and European Cups, and Manchester City were nowhere. They were absolutely nowhere to be seen. What's it like now as a Man U fan to have your rivals going toe to toe, winning leagues?
Horrible.
Well in Europe?
Yeah, horrible. But I'm quite proud of the fact that I haven't changed my stance towards City in terms of my feelings towards them, in terms of the rivalry and people I occasionally bump into. It's always been the biggest rivalry. I've got the same feeling towards City now that I had when they were in the third division. So I haven't changed that. And a lot of my close mates who I go to games with are very, very similar. There is absolutely a large contingent of United supporters who've never even given City a second glance because they were nowhere and they were just, the other club in the city that you used to sort of laugh at. And Liverpool was always the biggest rivalry. For obvious reasons. There's the City rivalry, there's as in the two cities, Manchester and Liverpool rivalry, and then there's also all the history that comes with that, and also then there's the football matters of ultimately Ferguson set himself the target of knocking them off a perch, and Liverpool ultimately was the club that United always aspired to be in terms of trophies. I remember Pete Hooton once being asked a question by our editor at the United We Stand fanzine, and Andy asked him, what's the difference between Manchester United and Liverpool, and Hooton said trophies. And that really hurts when you listen to that kind of feedback. So, that's where I think the bulk of the rivalry came from. But I think there's a generational thing as well. I think when you're born in sort of the early 70s, as I was, you were probably, City, back then were still a decent side. I think they got to a couple of League Cup finals. They certainly were capable of getting in the sort of top 6, top 7 in the league. Certainly their 1981-ish team that did reasonably well. I think they got to an FA Cup final where they got beat in the replay, which was hilarious. They got to a League Cup semi-final, so they were still competitive. So I think your attitude towards you, certainly in our league, is, because there's United fans who've been brought up on Arsenal being massive rivals and Chelsea being massive rivals. I'd go as far as to say, in terms of physical football in rivalry, I can't think of anything as good and as sustained as that sort of United-Arsenal rivalry that started in the sort of 1997-ish, that whole Ferguson-Wenger thing, and it went on for a whole decade of two great clubs going toe-to-toe on the pitch. And, it wasn't just a rivalry. The standard of football and the quality of games was just off the scale.
The games were a must-watch, even for us up here, they were a must-watch.
Absolutely, that. But yeah, my mindset hasn't really altered towards City in any way, and I am quite proud that I've been that bitter and twisted for so long now.
You mentioned a fanzine, United We Stand, and Celtic have been very well served over the years with fanzines, and until recently we had 5 still in circulation. We've still got 4, 1 from Ireland and 3 based in Scotland. It looked for a while that fanzines, print editions anyway, were dying out, but you were telling us earlier that United We Stand have got a very special anniversary this year.
Yeah, well, it's this week, it's 29 years, it first went on the streets this week, which is an incredible achievement for a printed mag in a digital age. You rightly reference. I mean, it's brilliant to hear that there's still 4 or 5 fanzines kicking about with Celtic. Andy Mitten, our editor, who's a renowned, respected journalist. He started the magazine when he was 15. He bought a 20 quid off his mum to get a load of photocopies done and stapled them together and literally stood on the streets outside Old Trafford in 1989 knocking them out for 50 pence. And obviously that led to it, people were buying it. And I think fanzines are so important because I don't think they just reflect football culture. I think we've got to look at why fanzines existed in the first place. For me, there's a big society impact here because I grew up in, we all know the trials and tribulations of inner cities in the sort of 70s and 80s, and the sort of social outpouring. And football became a bit of a venue for where a lot of that social unrest was outpoured. And I think, you can look quite deep into the sort of hooliganism element and why that came about. And people who think it was just a pure football thing are just deluded. It was very, very much a venue for people to just vent general unhappiness about the status of their lives at the time. And we grew up in a culture where we only had football. You either went to football or you played football in the back entries or on the fields if you were lucky enough to have grass near where you lived. And you did that. And I think that sort of culture, particularly in the north, it really manifested itself quite deeply. And you look to things like, the general dissatisfaction with how we were being treated by society and in particularly government. The north of England and certainly up here, we know about what's happened to dockyards and what's happened to miners and various other things. And, you can apply that to so many northern territories, and the general unrest regarding that, I think, had a big impact on what came sort of 5 or 6 years later with fanzine movement, because ultimately fanzines exist because people were generally not given a voice to say what they felt or what they thought.
It's a working class voice
that
the media wouldn't usually listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think bringing it in, I point at Viz Comic as an almost a really iconic part of a fanzine movement. And as a proud reader of Viz, who still has, I think, still got every copy that's ever been made from that. I quite liked that 2 fingers up to society, that kind of, let's just take a light-hearted look about some serious things, but ultimately not lose sight of those serious things and do it in it. And I think the culture of writing and the way people were responding was a really positive thing. And I think if you look at what happened in terms of how society came and then developed, and I used the reference before about how some of this sort of stuff ended up pouring out at football matches, which then triggered a lot of the clampdowns from the Tory governments, from Thatcher, who absolutely did, not only did she hate the North and she hated just about everybody up here, she hated football fans even more. So if you were from the North and you went to a football fan, Thatcher hated you. And she did everything in her power to make going to football as uncomfortable as possible. And we know how that sort of materialised in terms of, how that came. You look at some of the conditions we were going into games with, being hoarded in like animals, being treated so badly by the police, who at times were acting as like henchmen for that. And it was just an horrible time, and we all know where that ended up being with what happened at Hillsborough. And as football fans, we were giving authorities warnings about that sort of stuff for years and years and years. I was at Hillsborough as a United fan, I think in the February of '89, and I was crushed to within an inch of my life. And how anybody got out of that ground that day without, it was just incredible. We know what happened a couple of months later, and that could have happened to any club and any set of fans who were forced to go into a rickety old stadium that didn't have a safety certificate. And then what happened after that, for me, the cover-up was basically an attack on football fans, not just Liverpool. It was an attack on football fans full general. And, the cover-up and obviously what we now know about that, I think it was just really, really indicative of how football fans were perceived and treated.
Definitely.
And I think what fanzines ultimately, though, have always been there to is to sort of stand up, not just against the sort of authority of government and various other things, but if you look at our clubs and how we've been sort of generally treated throughout our lives as football fans, it was an opportunity for fans to say, we're not having this rammed down our throats anymore, whether it be about stuff on the pitch or about conditions of stadiums or about the way clubs were not doing what they should have been doing in the communities and various other things. They just became voices for people who weren't allowed to have a voice about their club and their community to suddenly go out there and start using it. So, it's great that, fanzines still exist. We've seen so many good ones fall by the wayside in print. A lot of them still survive sort of digitally. But, we're really proud of the fact that United We Stand's in its 29th year. Red News is older than United We Stand. I think that's 31 years and that's still going. And, as a 47-year-old man who doesn't really deal with the cold weather as much as he used to be, as well as he used to be, I still stand on the street selling it. And that ultimately is what keeps fanzines alive. You've got to have content, but you've also got to have people who are willing to go out there and flog it to people. That's an important part.
There is a place for fanzines, physical fanzines, because if the content's different, then online is it's a quick hit. It's a very quick hit. If you've got decent writing in a fanzine, it'll stand the test of time. And obviously United has got a decent standard of writing. The Celtic fanzine have got a decent standard of writing, or they wouldn't be here. You read me and Paul contribute to More Than 90 Minutes, which is the Irish Celtic fanzine as well, and that's got a decent standard of writing, so that's why it's still there. But what the fanzine has to do is it's got to be timeless. It's got to cover, as you say, issues, because all the issues that you raised there, Steve, the community, the stadiums, even though we're 29 years down the line for where United We Stand started, these issues are still there. We're still treated like second-class citizens sometimes.
Well, the Offensive Behaviour Act is a prime example. But the perception of the government at Hillsborough of football fans was such that every single victim was tested for alcohol content. You're talking kids getting blood tested, lying there dead in a gym hall, and they're getting blood tested.
No, it was disgraceful. The whole decade was, and it, how it culminated. It was tragic, and I think it's we often talk about it wasn't a football tragedy, so it was a human tragedy, but ultimately the causes of all of those of what happened that day had been coming for a long time. And I think the point about fans in general, it's almost like your point there about we're still treated. I still think that there is a bit of a stigma attached to certain match going fans and types, and you only have to look on Twitter at certain groups who try and get on a train, and ultimately they're being sanctioned that they can't do this, they can't do that. People not being able to have a drink inside a stadium because they're at a football match, but if there's a rugby league match on the following week in the same stadium, then you do what you like. There's still this thing attached to sort of football fans, and that's got to change over a period of time. What I find a little bit nauseating on that front is, rather than the club change their approach to people who've been going to games for a long time, you kind of get the sense that, particularly at the big clubs, they'd rather just change the audience and have you out and have somebody else completely different in. And listen, going to watch United was something I've always done, and I'm not having that taken away by anybody. So
you'll be the same as us. United's away support will be completely different for the United home support. The Celtic away support is completely different for the Celtic home support. That's what's happening, but the major clubs would rather have the sterile, stadium-friendly home fans that they get there, the entertainment systems and all of that, even though ours looked alright. But it's still, why do you need an entertainment system? But that's the way things are going. We have to embrace that. But as you say, clubs would rather change. The Premier League for user, I think the average age of the fan now is over 40.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still seeing people in. My first game was in 1978. My dad took me, and even though my dad was a City fan, he'd finally accepted that my choice in life was that. And for a couple of months, for probably 2 seasons or so, he used to take me to United and our kid used to come as well, my brother. And then the next week we'd go to Main Road and watch United and watch City. So I had the best of both worlds, watching United win one week and then watching City embarrass themselves the following week. So it was always all right for that. But when I started going to Main, I was going to games on my own age, probably 10, 11 years of age. And then I started doing away games on my own around 12, 13, because that's kind of what you did back then. Age is just a thing. It's not necessarily a reflection of maturity. And I think, we were older as 12, 13-year-olds back then than we are as 12 and 30-year-olds now. But I also think that you look at affordability now compared to a couple of quid pocket money used to be able to get me to and from North Manchester on 2 buses, get me access into the stadium for 70, 80, 90 pence, and then get me back, and I'd also be able to get a drink, and I'd be able to get a pie, and then I'd be back home. Unless someone's getting the best part of a ton a week pocket money now, the youth of today aren't getting into football stadiums, and I really, really worry for the future of the game, because I look around at United. Your point there about the average age. I look at people now in the age, and it's the same people, particularly at away games. The average age is definitely well into the 40s. And you look at now what's happening, where's the generation coming through under us? And that's what football just has lost complete and utter sight of. It's absolutely all about the now and the money now. And it's not looking at what's coming in, because there's no if you take it United, there's no generation coming in after me. And when that stops, unless they change radically accessibility into football stadiums, i.e. making these stadiums big enough because I don't think football should be in a closed shop. It should be absolutely open to all. And when I was growing up, football was open to anybody who wanted to get into a stadium, whereas now that just isn't the case. And you mentioned the point about the away support. We get 13 or 14, probably less than that, 10,000 applications for away tickets for an allocation of 2,000. That's just not enough to go around. And we know that grounds give allocations because they've got the home support to cater for. But again, it's like this whole closed shop thing. And again, it's like, because it's in demand, they can charge what they want, because they know that people will pay for it. You only have to walk up and down. We were at Chelsea away the other week. You only have to walk up and down the street, and there's people willing to part with 400, 500, 600 quid for a £30 ticket just to get into a game, because they can.
I was going to ask that if the tickets were still £30. I knew.
Yeah, away tickets are capped at 30. Yeah, I think Southampton, there's a capped. So if you go to Southampton, there's a 20. So again, it's nice to hear those kind of things. But again, I as good as that is, we're praising gestures that should be commonplace, not. We're not saying they've done a wonderful thing here. They've done what they should have done. And getting into a game should be, it's got to be accessible and it's got to be affordable. And I challenge whether football nowadays is either of those things. And I think that the future's, and again, this is bringing it back to the fanzines. Fanzines often are the voices of fans, the platforms for fans. And I think Andy's attitude has always been with the fanzine. He doesn't agree with everything that gets written in it and printed in it, but he believes in their right to have that platform to say those kind of things. And I think that's why fanzine culture, I think, was important in the 80s when we really were an oppressed group. And I think it's really, really important now, because, albeit for totally different circumstances, I still think that the football belonging to the communities and the working class element of society is getting taken away again, and it needs to come back, because football clubs, I think, are really, really important parts of of areas, particularly in some of the inner cities, where those clubs are an important establishment.
The thing with fanzine culture that you talk about, it is generally when things are going bad or worse than the glory days. I mean, the Celtic fanzines mainly were born through the fact that we were on the brink of financial ruin. And it was the fans probably who saw it first, you know, a good few years before the press started reporting on it. And the fan movement was kind of born through the fanzines. So as a voice, with the shift in culture that you've just been speaking about there, in relation to clubs getting further up and further away from what the fans want, how does a fanzine survive these days, Steve? I know that it takes a lot of dedication for people like yourself, standing in all types of weather to sell it. But I'm guessing that sales over the piece have diminished slightly or majorly.
Yeah, there was definitely a lull about... Because the other thing I think is quite important here, and bringing it back to a point Kevin made before, there's been a real change in demographic of supporter as well. A lot of the fanzine audience, they're usually the first to get either priced out or outdone from those accessibility points that I talked about. They're also usually sometimes the first to be that disgruntled. They'd rather just sack it off, and I think a lot of the conventional fanzine audience have kind of moved on into other areas. So I think it's definitely been a challenging time for fanzines. I think it's not as straightforward as if you've got content. People will sort of buy it out there. Ultimately, you've got to have the audience that still wants to listen and still wants to read that. I think what Andy's done brilliantly well with at United, he's always made the printed fanzine a special thing, and he's always championed the fanzine, even though we do offer various things. We've got it on a digital channel which you can download. We do the podcast, we've got a YouTube channel. We kind of do embrace some of those things, but they're geared towards the fanzine and trying to encourage people to pick it up and have a read, or pick it up and pick up a pen and send us some stuff in. Yeah. And I think he's been, we've been quite clever with that. Are we selling what we used to sell sort of back in the sort of mid-90s? Absolutely not. But, we're still ticking over nicely, and we're still, I think, doing very, very well with a paper mag, a printed mag, in a digital age. And I think that's down to, it's got a great editor, it's got some really strong, really, really good writers in there. And we're not just talking about, idiots like me who go to the match and write about that. We've got people, really established journalists. Jim White from The Telegraph, is a home and away United fan. He's been a contributor to the magazine for a long, long time. We've got a contributor who wrote for the Manchester Guardian sort of 50, 60 years ago, who still writes pieces for our fanzine. So, we do all of the usual things. There's stuff in there about fashion, there's stuff in there about music, and we're not adverse as well to giving platforms to things like book reviews and what other clubs do. We always dedicate a couple of pages, when we've got an up-and-coming game against a side, we always dedicate a couple of pages to those as well. So I think the balance of content's really good. And I think the fact that it's been going for so long as well means that there's a reputational thing there that will always help you stand the test of time. But again, as I said, you've still got to have people who are about to brave elements and get out there on the street. And, we're lucky enough to still have a core group of, 8 or 10 people who we can call on to get out there and sell. Look, nobody minds standing there in a T-shirt and a pair of shorts in August, knocking it out, and everybody's happy to do that. But we're about to hit, it's not as cold as it is up here in Manchester, but it's certainly wetter. And we had some really, really tough times last season. And again, these things impact it. The weather absolutely can nail you sometimes. If you get a rainy day and then United have the audacity to get beat, then it can be quite a grim stand there for the hour after the game selling it. And it's a big commitment for people to make. We are, for a 3 o'clock kickoff, if we use that as even though it's kind of not the norm anymore, if we use that as the standard, our lads are meeting at 11:30 and then they're standing on the street from 12. And then they go in the game and they're getting in 1 or 2 minutes after kick-off, and then they're leaving the stadium a handful of minutes before full time. And there's been times where that's been a tough one to swallow when you're missing. There's lads here who've missed Michael Owen's last win at Midden in the derby and all that kind of stuff. It's a big commitment that a fanzine seller makes, and any fanzine editor, any fanzine seller who's listening to this from other clubs will know that that's a big commitment that people make, and you're lucky to have those. So, long may that continue, and long may fanzines continue to be, because I think they're an important part of when you're walking up to the stadium, because the match day, it's always been about, if you think about what was your first buzz when you went to your first Celtic match? You probably can't remember what was on the pitch or whatever happened. You might be able to remember the score, but you can remember the noises. You can remember sort of smells from the catering vans. You can remember
the urine coming down the tail.
Yeah, all these kind of things. So all of these kind of things. I think the whole piece around seeing fanzines being available on streets outside stadiums, I really like seeing that. And even when I go to away games, I was at Stamford Bridge the other week. CFC UK, he had 5 or 6, Dave who runs that, he had 5 or 6 lads out on the street, and that, was doing a decent little trade, and, absolutely fair play to anybody who stands there and is willing to do that, and particularly this time of year.
I still like the physical fun. I still like to pick up something to read, and maybe that's me just showing my age, to tell you the truth.
It's good for a writer as well, Kevin, to be published physically,
But United, is there any relationship between the fanzine and the club? Can you sell it within the footprint of the stadium? Because at Celtic, you can't.
Yeah.
So one of the bad things about where the fanzine sellers at Parkhead have to go now, they have to be further away from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So where the bus park is, if you want a fanzine, once I get off my coach, I have to actually walk back out to go and pick one up. Go back on myself. Is there anything like that? United okay with you?
They get a bit precious if we stray into things like the bridge over the north towards the north stand, but Sir Matt Busby Way at the end of the day isn't owned by them, and we stand in places where we know we're okay. And I think the other thing though that's particularly important here is Andy's relationship as a journalist with the club is really important there. And I think if you look at we were the first to get Jose Mourinho interviews. We've had pretty much every manager that we've had since Ferguson in their early doors. We've been able to get interviews with Richard Arnold, with Ed Woodward, David Gill, etc., etc. So I think Andy's status as a journalist and the general credibility of United We Stand does help with those kind of things. But ultimately we know if we stood in the mega store selling it, I can predict what would happen. So we've got our pitches all dotted around in the various places, and we tend to stick to those. The consistency of knowing where you can get it is important. But I think the relationship with the club thing is an important thing for a fanzine, that, because what you want to be at the end of the day, you don't lose sight of the fact that you're a fan of the club, but ultimately you've got to also be there to sort of challenge that club as well. And I think Andy's editorial strength is that he gets a really good balance with that. And United We Stand won the fanzine of the year at the FSF Awards, Football Supporters Federation Awards in 2012, I think it was. And when they read out the reason for it, it was they read out, it's not afraid to be critical of the club. And I think the fact that our relationship and status and amongst the United supporters and also with the club is strong is testament to Andy's ability as an editor.
You mentioned Mourinho there. Just a quick one from an outside perspective looking in. Mourinho's gesturing to the crowd following the game against Juventus. Ronaldo celebrating by showing him his six-pack, right? You do that in Scotland, Steve. If Neil Lennon does that to the Hearts fans, he's bringing an assault on himself. And by all accounts, if you listen to certain parts of the Scottish media, what's your thoughts on that as a Man United fan looking up and seeing Neil Lennon being assaulted, and then a section of the press saying, but he's asking for it?
Yeah. Ooh, didn't come here prepared for this.
Put you on the spot there, mate.
You have, absolutely. I think everybody knows that. How can I put this right? I think everybody knows you know the tension that surrounds certain games, and I think you also know that if you provoke some of those things, then things are going to happen. So I obviously watched what happened, and it was the Hearts-Hibs derby, wasn't it? I wasn't surprised that he did it. I wasn't surprised at what happened.
Did you laugh when he done it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You've got that laughed when Mourinho done that.
Yeah. No, I think
I went, well.
You took it the right way. The problem we've got is I was elsewhere when that game was getting played, and I was listening to it on the radio. Gary Caldwell, ex-teammate, first thing he says, he brought that on himself, an assault.
I think, but don't forget that there are certain people who are the easiest of targets, and there are some people who are just absolutely bomb-proof. And the example I'll use is Mourinho can do the same thing as Jurgen Klopp, but people will call Mourinho arrogant and that he's trying to aggravate people for doing it. Whereas if Klopp or Guardiola did it, it's down to passion and energy, and he's just basically being a fan on the touchline. And that's kind of sometimes I think.
The City documentary, it was on Amazon. Guardiola, the way he was behaving, and everybody going, that was great, I didn't expect him to be like, and I'm going, it's a bit of a bully, eh? It's how you perceive it. But if that's how he gets results, that's how he gets results.
Well, he's a fantastic coach, and we all know that. But he also sounds like a man who isn't necessarily in control of himself. But I think, again, football's a passionate and emotional game, and ultimately we're human beings, and there's only a certain amount of provocation that an individual can take from anywhere. And if I'm sat in a pub this evening, I'll mind my own business. But if somebody sits there and keeps having a go at me, after, at some point I'm gonna snap, or that's going to get to me. So again, it's one of those. I think certain individuals, generalising this now, there are certain individuals, players and managers, who I think are just easy targets, and I think the same behaviour can be classed as two completely opposite ends of a spectrum, depending on whether somebody's a bit of a media darling or not. And I think there's examples of that. Certainly with Mourinho, we know what he is. People know what Neil Lennon is. We know that you're going to get a reaction out of it. But then there's another argument to say, well, both a box office when it comes to
entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those. I think where I get a little bit narked by those things isn't so much what they've done or whoever did it or what triggered it. It's more just how these things are perceived when one person does it, and versus how it's perceived if someone else does it. I think that's what's fundamentally wrong. Those kind of inconsistencies, both in terms of how hierarchy of associations and disciplinary panels look at these things, and also how how the media portray them as well. When you look at this, this business about Mourinho getting, he got charged by the FA, he got knocked back, and the FA are now appealing it. I mean, talk about an agenda against somebody. And I think, again, if that was another manager, this is my point, I'm not sort of defending him in any way, because I thought, again, he was, there's an argument to say, look, you're the manager of a football club, for God's sake, as much as I love it as a fan, you kind of can't really grumble when people react to it, or when people who are waiting to haul you over the coals, and you gift wrap them an opportunity to come out and do exactly that. It's kind of, it's the equivalent of, you can see the cop car line ahead on the street with the speed gun at you, and you choose to do 50 and a 30. I mean, you're kind of inviting it on, aren't you? You know what I mean? You know what the outcome of that's going to be. But it's the inconsistency of it that really winds me up, that some managers get nailed for it and some get away with it.
I do love your point with Klopp and any other manager. If they would have done what Mourinho did, I'll put this point out there. If Craig Levein, who is a pound shop Mourinho, would have done what Neil Lennon had done, the Scottish press would have loved it.
It would have been
perceived
classic.
Completely differently.
I love to see managers do stuff like that. It's part of the game. Guys like Neil Lennon, if they are on your side, you love them. If they're not, you hate them. But that's the sort of guys they are. It's football. It's part of the game. If you can't see that and not throw a coin at someone, what's going on with your life? The
bottom line, I've been in stadiums where Kirk Broadfoot has gave me the Vicky, and I've laughed because we've gave him abuse for 90 minutes. They've ended up beating us 1-0, and he's ran the length of the stand, giving us, get it right up you, and you went, aye, fair play to you.
Folk who whine about that sort of thing just shouldn't be at a game.
You're right. Lafferty gave us the bird last season, and everybody laughed at him as he was getting subbed off the pitch.
Do you remember the greatest ever was Adebayo's celebration? It's the only City goal I've ever enjoyed in my life, where he literally ran the whole pitch just to dive in front of the Arsenal fans. I mean, that was gloriously funny to watch. But I think in a cold light of day, I think we all know deep down, when we put our take our football hats off and put our sensible family man or our work heads on, I think we all know that these are pretty daft things to do, and you kind of know what the reaction of that's going to be. But again, bringing it back to that, people pick and choose when something's unacceptable crowd behaviour and when something's just passionate support. And people start getting all, you've had the River Plate Boca Juniors game that everybody was tossing themselves off over the weekend, right? And I mean, the stadium was literally on fire, right? There's people bouncing up and down. There's smoke everywhere. There's all sorts of stuff going on. But hey, it's passion.
With a book he's bile and the girl ups at him like he's bone idle. he's got a job, he just feels entitled. He's a plastic spoon in an eaten trifle. Frank's got a taste for the stellar arts wine. He's playing havoc with his fella's foie gras. He spends most nights skipping in car parks, surrounded by fat packets and scratch cards. By the morning he'll be back to graft in an Ivy's jacket. He's still half smashed, no visible income, just handed cash. He never comes close to a banker's draft. To make ends meet, Frank's constantly scheming. It's all too short to spend your days dreaming. You only get one and it's his life he's leading. King for the day, man, carpe diem. He's king for the day till the money's spent. Then he's got no other way than to pay the rent. And although life didn't turn out how it's meant, he'll do whatever to make you feel free. He's king for the day till the money's spent. Then he's got no other way than to pay the rent. And although life didn't turn out how it's meant, he'll do whatever to make you feel free. She don't like him drunk, he hates being sober. Life gives him lemons, he's opening up Coronas. It eases the weight she lays on his shoulders. She's got more interest than a payday loaner. A stoner with a nagging men. Frank's in town chasing dragons' dens, shoplifting every weekend to sell on the crown at discounts of friends. Robin Hood from the hood that steals from the rich on minimum wage and claiming benefits. His criminal ways, giving ways to exist. In with a beer, ooh with a split. Keeps them living here and out of the nick. It isn't your life or one you would pick to survive or thrive with the card you're given. You only get one, make it one you live. He's king for the day till the money's spent. Then he's got no other way than to pay the rent. And although life didn't turn out how it's meant, he'll do whatever to make you feel free. He's king for the day till the money's spent. Then he's got no other way than to pay the rent. And although life didn't turn out how it's meant, he'll do whatever to make you feel free. We're all trying to make a quid out of 15 pence. It's hard to live legit and still make our ends meet. For the green of the queen in our genes, by any given means, we're all driven to be living like James Dean. Cause tomorrow's unborn and yesterday's brown bread. Not only royals walk around with a crown on their head. He's king for the day till until the money's spent. Then he's got no other way than to pay the rent. And although life didn't turn out how it's meant, it doesn't matter as long as he's free.
Top lyrics, top quote. That's our kid, according to Liam Gallagher. Our kid, aka Dave Scott, is another one who, in the words of our very own Kevin Graham, follows in the lineage of Marquis Smith and Sean Ryder, with sharp observations of everyday Manc life. Dave Scott is a street poet whose work has been used by Fansbet and Manchester United. He's now turned his hand to music, and you've just heard his debut single, Frank, which is out now. His debut album, Haven for Heathens, is out in March. Fansbet are a new online bookmaker who promise to share 50% of their net profits from tagged accounts for causes that matter the most to fans. The business is about fans and run by match-going supporters, and we at a Celtic State of Mind are delighted to be partnered with them. If having a bet is already part of your match day and something you enjoy doing on football, racing or any sport, then you can download the Fansbet app to sign up. If you do so, then please select Celtic as your club and a Celtic State of Mind, and you'll be making a contribution to keeping your podcast going and supporting other Celtic causes. They've already helped to make a difference to the fan community by contributing to fanzines, supporter trusts, branches with travel costs, and they were also part of the first safe standing installation in England at Shrewsbury Town. You can visit blog.fansbet.com to read more about that on their Giving Back page. Back for part 2 of A Celtic State of Mind with Steve Armstrong and David Alexander of Fansbet. You were talking earlier about, you brought up a Clyde fan, and the famous Clyde Celtic game was the one where you beat us, and Joe Miller and Graham Roberts were in charge at that time. That was Roy Keane's debut. Now, coming into this interview, Kevin and I were talking about the relationship between Man United and Celtic, and we were saying it's kind of unbalanced because we've given you Paddy Crerand, Lou Macari, Brian McClair, Jimmy Delaney, and what have we got in return? Lee Martin, Roy Keane, who
Dion
was
Dublin.
past it, Dion
Lee Martin talks really fondly about his time up here, so and I can highly recommend you having a chat with Lee, actually.
Lee Martin went through Man United 89, started Fergie just before Fergie turned Man United round, and also with us, Lou Macari. then he was there at Celtic at the takeover.
That was at a game he broke his leg. He was playing fullback, he broke his leg, never played again for us. So let's talk about some of these Man United stroke Celtic legends, and in particular Brian McClair. He came up last month. He joined us for the launch of our event in the Poetry Club. The guy he's an interesting character. He's intelligent. He's a bit different from your typical footballer or ex-footballer. He was telling me a wee story about a magazine article he did in the 1980s where he had to dress as a member of Wham with Paul McStay. And he was just laughing because he's waiting for this picture to appear on Twitter. So what's your relationship like with Brian? How is he involved in what you're doing just now? Yeah,
I mean, we'll come to what we're doing in a bit with regards to the Fansbet concept. But yeah, I mean, to just talk about Brian as a player, I mean, I said something to him recently, actually, which the reason I think he's idolised, and he is generally held in the really highest of regard. I mean, he achieved a lot at United, couple of FA Cups, couple of league titles. He was definitely in that side that went from nothing to something, and then to the brink of something even bigger that then the next generation had to take on. And he absolutely, for me, deserves so much credit for being part of that building process towards that. But also, his commitment whilst at United, people love him for obviously the fact that, he scored 30 goals in his first season, which broke that whole hoodoo of nobody had actually ever scored. And what I said to him the other week, one of the reasons I really have him on a high pedestal as a footballer, and I do think he deserves his status in United's sort of iconic history, is we went through a phase of just getting absolute garbage in at sort of centre forward. If you kind of take Hughes out of that, and he disappeared off to Barcelona and Bayern Munich for a couple of seasons, but we went through this phase. It sort of started with Gary Birtles. It was just an appallingly bad decision to make. So he rocks up and he's just rubbish. It took him something like 30 games to score his first goal, and then you got we went through this phase of Alan Brazil and Terry Gibson and Peter Davenport, and just pure unadulterated.
Name Davenport, I can just picture my shoot with Peter Davenport.
Yeah. Well, exactly. You know what I mean? And it must have been a quiet week in the shoot office for them to decide that he was going to go on the front cover. By all means, it must have been a really slow news week, that one. But, I think all of a sudden then we had somebody who could stick the ball in the net. And, he rocks up and scores 20-odd league goals in his first season, 30 in total, and he broke this sort of first United player to score 20 goals in a season since George Best or whatever. So he certainly sort of broke a hoodoo of us not being able to get a sort of centre forward. But I think he also stood for everything that Ferguson wanted out of Manchester United, which was work hard, graft hard, but if it goes off, you're all in this together. And certainly the 94 team, in fact, I mean, you can sort of, he's most famous for that big, there was a big kick-off against United v Arsenal, where, it was that big a kick-off. Arsenal got deducted, 2 points, and United 1 point, which I was a bit disappointed about. At the end of the day, that means Arsenal were better at the fighting than we were, is the way I look at that. I'd rather United had lost 3 points and Arsenal 2, but he was obviously the person who seemed to have aggravated that, and everybody loves a player who's a bit of a narc and who gets stuck in. We all like that, but he was certainly a really, really key part of the development of that next generation, and he then went on to carry on doing that with his work as the reserves and academy manager, I think he was. And he's just always been one of these really true footballers, true to themselves, not flash, never lost sight of the people who were great to him in the game, but also never lost sight of the importance of the supporters as well. And that's how I summarise why he's really, really important to United. And he speaks, whenever I sort of see him and speak to him, he's equally fond of his time here as well. And he's one of those guys who'll just, he really, really cares about the game and the grassroots element of the game. And it's one of the reasons he's involved with us in a business venture, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit. But yeah, he's a top man.
Yeah, we were talking about it, Kevin, because we never had time to touch on his Man U career when we spoke to him last month. But when you look at some of the pivotal kind of early Premiership moments, you look at the scrap with Arsenal, Davy Booth breaking his leg, David Beckham's goal against Wimbledon. McClair's there. He's at all these pivotal moments in the kind of early Premiership history. Was he playing that night when Cantona kicked the fan?
Was he a sub that night?
He was there or thereabouts, wasn't he?
He was an important part of that whole toughening up Manchester United, because I've always thought one thing that any successful side ultimately has is when you actually get down to it and start cutting through, okay, what are the similarities between some of these? We all know that they can all play football, but so can any side, really, if you look at it. But one thing that the truly great sides have is if it's going to go off, then we're also going to beat you up as well. We'll beat you at football, but if you want to tangle, then we're going to have you as well. And that 1994 side just was a team that I don't think it's our best side. And a lot of United fans would disagree with me and say they think that's our best ever team. I'm in the 2008 team. It's the greatest I've watched. But one thing I will say is nobody messed around with that 1994 team. And I think we all love players that... because I think when we started adding the likes of... United were absolutely a one-man team with Brian Robson in the sort of 80s. The greatest player I've ever seen, still my hero. But he was the only person, kind of him and Whiteside, who were the only ones who really sort of forever got stuck in at these sort of big games. And whenever we won at Anfield, and it was always a Robson and a Whiteside show. The one thing that we got then by adding the likes of McClair and Bruce and Paul Ince and all of these other players and bringing Hughes back as well, we suddenly ended up with an entire team who, if it's going to go off here, we're all in this. And, that kind of, don't mess with us mentality, I think, is always a bit of a bedrock of great teams. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Definitely.
All with yourselves up here as well. Teams that you just don't mess with.
Roy Aitken.
Well, just on that, because obviously Panini stickers also, I think that most people in England, we grew up knowing everything about Scottish football because of Panini stickers. And, the Celtic team always looked like hard nuts. Danny McGrain was always somebody. I used to look at him and think, I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of that one. And there was a load of players up here that were like that.
Aye, and then there was a period in the 80s where they were all sharing a bottle of peroxide. Peter Grant, Tony Shepherd, Maurice Johnson. They all had this flashy blonde in their hair. But the Scottish football stickers were half and half. We didn't get a full sticker until like the 1990s. Remember that?
Was not even. I knew Scottish leagues. I think Division 1 and 2 were. Even the Premiership was.
Even the Premier League for a long time. It was the tiny wee half and half.
I remember the half and halves. Yeah,
we're always the poor cousins.
Yeah. I know.
Poor neighbours.
But yes, as you were saying before, talking about Brian McClair, some involvement with what you're involved in now, Steve. Could you tell us a wee bit about Fansbet? How you got involved?
Okay, Fansbet was a company that was formed in. By a couple of Scandinavian football fans who were fanatical about football. And if you ever go to Scandinavia, you do find that people are far more passionate than sometimes we ever are. And their knowledge, and they're almost encyclopedic about what they know. So they come up with this concept of providing a betting platform that allowed football fans to nominate a cause that any revenue that the business made off that would be shared back out. So quite simply, Fansbet is a concept where people can open a standard sportsbook betting account like they would have with any other provider, but with the difference being that when you nominate who you support and a cause, a dedicated fan partner that can be a fanzine, a trust, a branch that does travel, you name it, there's loads of opportunities for people to do that. We make a commitment that any net profit that's made on that account, we will share 50% of that back to those causes. I got involved with it in a sort of consultant capacity, really. I was sort of my working life when I'm not at football has always been I got to a reasonably senior level within a massive retail organisation. I'd spent 29 years with them. Fantastic business, and a business I still love. But 29 years is, and I reached, I was part of the global operations director team. You get to a point where you think, there's nowhere else for me to go here. And I'd always wanted an opportunity to do something different towards the sort of latter age of my career. And when these guys approached me about, look, we've had success with this Fansbet concept, because they devised Red Army Bet specifically for Manchester United fans in Scandinavia and Reds Bet for Liverpool fans in Scandinavia. They'd obviously seen that as a proof of concept work very well, and then obviously Fansbet as an idea was born. Well, why not just do this across the board? So we got talking around sort of May of 2017, and as somebody who loves football, somebody who loves working, but also I've always loved a bet. I've always enjoyed, particularly on horse racing, which is a sport I absolutely adore. I got involved in a sort of giving advice and helping out capacity, but the more we chatted and the more I felt aligned with them as people, the more I got really embraced into this idea of, hang on, if I can be involved here in something that's enabling football fans or sports fans to create revenue from doing something that they are doing anyway or enjoy doing, and then potentially gear it back towards, if you're winning as a punter, brilliant, but if you're not winning, then some of that coming back to something that really matters to you. It just sounded like a brilliant concept, and for them to sort of trust me with the honour of basically them saying, you're the person we think that can bring this to life in certainly in the fan world in the UK. It was a great honour to be asked that, and it was just one of those sort of career opportunities that I just thought, I can't turn that down. But again, it's all deep rooted back to sort of this sort of sense of community. And I came from an area of North Manchester that we grew up with now, and we had nothing in the community that we were in. And I've always been very, very keen on things that give back to communities or are part of communities, and to suddenly be presented with an opportunity that combined three things that I love doing, which is my job, having a bet, and football, all geared towards something like that, a community-based cause. I just really loved the sound of that. So, I made the decision to get involved in that. I've been with the business for a year, and, so far so good. It's going particularly well.
With regards, Steve, to some of the causes, like, if you mentioned fanzines, and we've spoken about the struggles that fanzines have, what kind of fanzines have benefited from Fansbet's involvement, and how have they been kind of resurrected or given a new lease of life? Yeah,
no, it's a great shout. I mean, we offer fans the opportunity to choose from, any fan partner that sort of makes a commitment to us and says, yeah, we will partner with you. And we've got about 100 and... I think we're up to about 114, 115. Yeah, it's about that. You'll hear a bit more from a Scotland point of view from David here in a second. But I think as a generalisation, we've got some sizable trusts on board. Manchester United, Doncaster Rovers were the first one. Manchester United Trust are involved. Peterborough Supporters Trust are involved. We've got numbers of travel branches up and down the country who just want to fund travel. But Fanzines, United We Stand, Red News, Red All Over the Land at Liverpool, When Skies Are Grey, True Faith in Newcastle, Love Supreme Sunderland. Who else have I mentioned there? There's The Gooner in London, the Fighting Cock podcasts, and we're committed to supporting things that matter to fans. And the one thing that we can absolutely 100% say without any argument is the business ultimately will always be fan-centric, because the person who's leading it is a fan, and our strapline of it being about fans and by fans and for fans, that'll never, ever, ever be anywhere other than front and centre of our organisation for as long as I'm involved in it. And I've got no desire to be moving on from, this is a business I want to be involved with until the last day of my working career. I'm really, really passionate about giving fans something back. Because we want to reward fan loyalty, perhaps when we think that perhaps maybe that's something that the clubs and the various people who've been in charge of the game over a number of years perhaps haven't done. When you're looking around at helping to keep fanzines alive, helping trusts to build, to bring some of their goals and objectives to life. And some of the trusts out there, some of it's about doing community work, some of it's a bit more serious than that. There are trusts out there who are desperately trying to get, the club back into the hands of fans and away from parasite owners who are just stripping the club bare. There's lots of opportunities, particularly for us to enable things like that. But just keeping fanzines on the street and helping fanzines to pay for content, helping fanzines to pay sellers. Absolutely buzzing that True Faith fanzine has now been able to come back in print, largely because of the help and the partnership with ourselves as well. We've helped put a fanzine back on the street, and that's such a buzz for us, to be involved with that. But we'll never not want to be part of the fan story, but we'll also never be bigger than the fan story as well, because, as I said, the business is about fans. When you're listening to brilliant schemes up and down the country, Peterborough United's the one I often talk about. They've got this smile ticket scheme where they give, whenever they've got funds available, they'll buy some tickets for the game and they'll try and give them out to people from underprivileged parts of the community. Because of the revenue that they've been able to get back from us, they've now been able to buy 4 season tickets. And a couple of weeks back, they went into the town centre and took 4 people off the streets who were homeless and took them to the game. And when you're part of enabling great
one of them
story.
no leave at half time.
I did hear that, yeah. I did hear that one of them did get off at half time, which was amusing. I've been to enough games myself where I've also wanted to get off at half time. But, when you can sort of see fanzines growing, and you can see podcasts, fan media getting off the ground, and us being able to sort of help, not just through fan partnership, but being able to support and sponsor as well, because we're also committed to try and, what marketing budget we've got. We'd rather not, we don't want to be on the television shouting at people in advertisement breaks. We'd rather have adverts in a fanzine. We'd rather have messages on podcasts. We want to help fans to get these things that are their only voices and all their only voice opportunities. We want to make sure that we're helping those to do that. And then, you look at some of the other issues as well. We were a big contributor to Shrewsbury Town's. Obviously, you guys were, I think, the first to go with the safe standing concept, which is fantastic. Shrewsbury Town were the first team in England to do that. And we kind of gave them the final kick over the line with a donation to get them over the line from a funding point of view. So, again, it's really, really nice to be involved in things that are helping fans to do things, either conventional stuff like match day experience stuff, whether it be tickets or travel, or whether it be bigger issues like safe standing or like club ownership and share status, or whether it be about things like keeping fanzines going, helping fans get their foot in the door with from a podcast point of view. So fans can listen to fans, instead of listening to the sort of spiel that's spouted from pundits up and down the country who might know what's going on a pitch, but haven't really got a great concept of what's going on in the stands, and in the lives of people in the stands as well. Mm-hmm. That's why I've always been a big believer in fan media and fanzine culture, because this isn't just about a fan saying, here's what my football opinion is. It's also a platform to say here's what my life opinion is as well. And if we can be part of things that help those to grow, then we've got a lot to look forward to.
So if you look at the concept in its simplest terms, Kevin, you are involved in running a supporters bus. How many people get in that bus every week? 50 people a week. Now, there's going to be a percentage of them who have betting accounts elsewhere with other providers.
I have actually counted, and there's 36 that have a betting account.
36, yeah, that's interesting. So you've got 36 accounts. They'll all be spending X amount or losing X amount a month. You're not asking them to change their habits. You're not trying to get the other 14 guys to set up a betting account. You're just saying, change your provider from that one, change it to Fansbet, and the benefits will go to these groups that are organised by fans.
Yeah, we've said all along. Look, we don't just want to reward. We'll also, we don't want this to just be about. Look, if somebody's, we've just actually given some revenue back to. We've got 3 fan partners in Liverpool. Scousers are brilliant punters. We've just given some revenue back. They're winning. They're collectively, over a period of time, but they're bringing great fan partners to us, and so we're even sharing revenue where perhaps. It isn't just about people who are betting with us and not, fortunately, winning money back. We're trying to make sure that we're offering fan partners a partnership with us where we can sort of help them across the board. I think the important part for us is ultimately we're well aware of our responsibilities towards responsible and enjoyable gambling. We know full well about our responsibilities towards complying with the UK Gambling Commission and everything that they stipulate that we have to do, and we're very, very committed to doing that. And we're absolutely not, under any circumstances, telling people to suddenly start betting because this is a great idea. We're absolutely not saying that. Or we're not saying to people, suddenly start betting more because that way you can raise more. What we're saying is if you have a bet, we're asking you to just come and play with us because we're promising to do something different to what other providers will offer you that, and that's what we're asking people to do. We're giving them a choice to do that, and maybe at the same time as doing something that they enjoy, whether it's somebody who does a regular horse racing punter or someone who will happily sit up at night and have a dabble on various other sports that are live and in running, or whether it's somebody who just does the fiver accumulator of a weekend, or even down to the person who just says, I'll do my fiver on the Grand National every year and that's my lot. Whatever. We want to be able to offer an opportunity, whatever people choose to do, and ultimately it is always a personal choice. We want to give people the opportunity to do it with us because our promise is that we will give something back to something that really matters to you.
The reason that you're in here today talking to us is because when I heard about yous, I looked into yous, we wouldn't have any other betting company in here talking to us. because we know how sometimes betting sport is actually viewed. And when we heard what you were doing, we went like that. We want to get involved in this. This is something, you mentioned yourself, you've kept on going on about the fanzine culture and stuff like that. This is about fans getting something back for a pastime that the majority of fans already do.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. But I also think, David, who joined the business a few months back, he's I don't know the Scottish game, I don't know the law of the land, but the one thing I do know is that the fan movement here and the general proactivity of supporters is really, really inspiring, and I've sort of seen that sort of firsthand. And David's obviously been involved. You've been involved in that yourself for a while, and
I've been a Clyde fan all my life. Ironically, I actually told my dad I was going to be a Celtic fan when I was a kid, and he said no chance, and started taking me to Clyde games, to Douglas Park when we played in Hamilton. So followed them all over the country. I think I've been to just about every ground because of our plummet through the leagues, but you get to see all the country. And obviously the fan culture at a club like Clyde's a bit different than supporting Celtic or Man United, but I probably know everybody who supports, or certainly I know all the faces. And to be able to have a job that you can give something back to supporters is just absolutely brilliant, and I'm looking forward to the first time we can do it to a Scottish group of supporters.
Who's involved in Scotland, who's signed up to be partners that you can tell us about?
Well, obviously, being a Clyde fan, Clyde Glasgow branch were the first to join up. They're the kind of self-proclaimed noisy boys of the Clyde support who like a drink before the away games. Probably I think the best supported away club in the leagues. Obviously, we've got yourselves involved. We've got the Cali Thistle online forum, the fantastically named Cockles Wilson St Mirren supporters group. Elgin City Football Club actually joined us last week. They are going to put their money towards a new project they're doing at Lesser Borough Briggs, which is a new community astroturf, which is a great project to be able to support, and it should be great for the town of Elgin as well as the supporters there. It's going good, and we've got a few kind of in the background. Hopefully we'll be getting to sign up in the next few weeks with some great causes. Obviously, Supporters Direct Scotland as well. I think that's how you guys heard of us, was on their podcast, and it's great to work with those guys because our aims absolutely match what they're doing, trying to empower supporters, and we can help make that happen.
It was interesting when we went to the SD conference, which was in a couple of months back, wasn't it? I think it was the first international break, wasn't it? It was great for us to be invited to that, and it was great that we were able to be the sponsor of the event. Listening to some of the fan ownership stories from the guys at Motherwell and then Hearts and St Mirren. I'm not singling them out in any way. Well, maybe I am here, I don't know. But I was particularly impressed with the journey that they've been on, as well as what's gone on with the other guys. And for different reasons, fan ownership has become a massive priority for some of those guys. And it was just great to sort of see that level of fan involvement, fan proactivity. But outside of that, I found it really, really interesting to see what they were also focusing in on. And, there's stuff around offensive behaviour, and there was stuff around diversity and discrimination. There was stuff around trying to get more women to go to games of football. And the other thing that I found really particularly interesting as well was looking at how independent support liaison officers are becoming a very, very, very important component of match day. And, one of the things that we've just been able to do now is the Manchester United Supports Trust, who are partnered with us and are receiving revenue. They're actually using revenue back from us to have a dedicated match support liaison officer in and around games, and always there. And being able to sort of see that now live on social media, where people can go to them with their issues and the problems, and seeing the fact that just one phone call with an ISLO has been able to get a club who were quite happy to sort of ban you for 3 years. Sort of common sense has sort of prevailed, and because what it's like sometimes with supporters. Sometimes we get we get kind of bullied into corners because deep down authorities know that you can't really afford to defend yourself anyway. So having ISLOs, I think, is really, really important for sort of stuff like that. But for just in general, somewhere for supporters to be able to go. And that's what ultimately, for me, trusts have got to do. They're there to represent fans of all ages and all groups and all sizes. And, seeing that come to life at United now, knowing that we've kind of helped out with that is quite rewarding. And I find it really interesting when we were at the SD conference to sort of see how much of a big priority that's becoming up here in Scotland. And again, I took a lot of stuff back from I think Alan showed me the SD support liaison officer manual, and it was a fascinating read. But you just sort of the Scottish game might not be as big as the game further down south, but I tell you what, the supporter commitment and the supporter movement up here is incredibly proactive. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on this podcast, because I'm not the type of person, but I genuinely was really, really inspired by what I saw that day from the various groups on all topics, not just the big level stuff like ownership, but just the general commitment to making going to the match a great place to be for all people. And ultimately, I think I said it earlier on, football shouldn't be a closed shop to anybody. It should be open to all, because it was open to all when we first started going, regardless of where we were from, what our upbringing was, what our economical status was. Football was open to everybody, and I think there's an element of exclusivity that's crept in. It's great to see sort of fans saying, no, we're not having that. This needs to be sort of open to all. So, we're very excited about the opportunity up here in Scotland, because I genuinely detect a really, really strong commitment from fans themselves. Because ultimately, for somebody to want to partner with you to raise revenue, they've got to have a cause. And there are some sort of groups that you sort of notice out and about that are just quite happy to exist. And I'm a member of a supporter trust because, do you know what? It gets me out of the house on a Tuesday night, and I can go and sit in a pub and have 5 or 6 pints and go home and tell a missus that I've been doing this, that and the other, or she can go home and say this to her other half, or whatever. It's kind of, we've seen a lot of that on our travels. And I know when I sit down with supporter groups, one of the first things I'll always look for is what's your purpose? What is the sole reason for your existence? Because you know that if you're sitting there talking to people who just don't have a goal, or don't have objectives, or don't have an aim in why they're doing what they're doing, then they're not going to do anything. They're not going to proactively support you in us trying to grow our business so we can do more for fans. But deep down, you know that they're not going to gain a huge amount from revenue that you're going to share back with them as well. So, certainly when I was up in Scotland at the SD conference, I was really, really inspired by what I saw. And David will tell you this. I was very, very keen to sort of, if we have to use Scotland as the driving force behind this project to showcase what great partnerships with great fan groups looks like and what it can achieve, then that would be great for us. We look forward to doing that with as many as we can.
Fans need to do it themselves up here. The money's no there for the clubs to actually do these projects. You talk about making football open for all. What yous are doing will make that, because the groups will do it themselves. We'll raise money ourselves to make it open for that wee guy who can't afford a ticket to come to the game. We'll clubs like Elgin, even our supporters club, even we'll do it with this podcast. We will help make it open. No, to try and get try and get people.
The thing is we also look at you've got the fan courses, but there are some clubs out there as well that very David just mentioned we've partnered with some physical clubs themselves who are promising to sort of commit back to anything from us to sort of the fan side of things. But we've been talking to quite a few of the sort of really low non-league club levels. Certainly in England, and one that springs to mind was we went to meet a club, and one of the first things we had to do, first of all, I had to let myself into the ground, which I found really odd. But when we got there, the chairman rocks up, and the first thing we had to do was help him get a fridge out the back of his car. And I'm sitting there handballing this fridge into the bar area of the main stand for them to plug it in and fill it, and then I'm filling it up with cans for him for that night's game. They had a friendly, they had like the last friendly of the season, and this is like one level below the league. By the way, we're not talking about some part-time school, Sunday league stuff here. I'm thinking, God, and we're sort of saying, he's sort of saying, listen, couple of grand a year from us, don't think that that's a tiny amount of money. That can make a hell of a difference to us, because I need, he's saying I need 200 grand a year to run this club, to keep this club that's been here since the 1800s, keep it going. And I'm not going to turn my nose up at pennies whether they're coming in from anywhere. So you sort of see a lot of that as well, and the opportunity to sort of again even enable things like that is really important. But the other thing that I think is key as well, and one thing that I think will always make us different, is we're very in tune, and I'm certainly very in tune with the changing landscape of what matters to a football fan. Because I think what matters to a football fan a lot these days perhaps isn't what mattered most to them, say, 10 or 20 years ago. And you sort of see that with a lot of movement around things that are very, very much. A lot of fans are giving feedback, and I noticed it on the Scottish Supporters Direct survey, very, very much reflected on the FSF surveys as well, where I think a lot of them were being quite critical of clubs don't seem to be reflecting the community where that club exists as much as they used to do. I think there's a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of fans who are now saying, well, all right, if the club don't want to do that, we'll do that. A lot of fans are now saying, do you know what, I don't go to the game anymore, or I don't go as often as I used to for whatever reason, but I'm still want to be associated with the community that surrounds the stadium and surrounds all of where I grew up or where I've been coming for all of these years. And this is why you're seeing tons of stuff now around. I mean, food banks is just about one of the biggest and most interesting fan movements that there is out there at the minute. And you look at the momentum that the joint venture between the Everton Trust and the Spirit of Shankly have done in Merseyside. It's incredibly good. And again, that's football fans who, by and large, would they don't like each other when it comes to the game, but when you sort of see fans getting behind things together and you see the power of what that can deliver, it's really inspiring. And you've got food bank movements there, and you've got food bank. The Manchester United Supporters Trust have a food bank drop off. This is central. This is Manchester in like 2018, and fans are feeling compelled to do this. A, because there's a need for it, but also they want to be part of something that makes a difference. And we definitely also see big opportunities for that. So we're also very, very in tune with the movement of what matters most to fans as well. We're not just sort of sit here saying, that cause, it can only go in this, that or the other. Within Reeves, and we very, very much want to stay true to things that matter most to fans as well. And, the landscape of what matters to a fan is really, really changing. We talk about fan causes, but there are also other causes that really matter to people who go to a game. And we're absolutely committed to helping.
There are social causes.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're absolutely exactly that. And we're committed to helping some of those come to life as much as we can as well.
Thank you again to Steve Armstrong and David Alexander of Fansbet, who are the new partners of A Celtic State of Mind. All of our podcasts, articles and videos can now be found on intocreative.co.uk. This site encapsulates our love of Celtic, music, books, film, politics and much more. Pay us a visit, check out our shop for merchandise and contribute your working ideas to the site. As always, thank you all for listening. Join us again next week, where we will have another guest with A Celtic State of Mind.